Hi everyone, this is Dina Aglioloro. I work at Ranson Middle School. I teach 8th grade ELA. This is my third year at that school, and one thing that we have really focused on this year would be teaching our students how to really utilize GIST statements while reading, whether it's informational texts or works of fiction. The reason why that we are focusing on this year is because the EOG is going to be online. So with that being said, we have started using Canvas in our school and doing a lot more of online-based work. And this has really been a struggle not only for us to get used to, but also for our students because they're very much used to being able to have the text in front of them, to underline things, to make notes, and to write just statements right on the paper. Now with the texts being online, they have to rely on online tools, which can be very frustrating, especially if their computer isn't working correctly. So we decided to take GIST statements to a different level this year to try and make students feel a little bit more comfortable with the changes that are going on. So my objective is to enhance students' comprehension by having them use information from text to identify the central idea. One thing that we've already noticed this year is that the central idea, which is a very large factor in Common Core standards that are assessed on state tests throughout the year, as well as the EOG, is that our students are missing this standard almost in every single test that we give them. So we really want to make sure that they understand that by writing GIST statements, going back and reading through their GIST statements, they should be able to understand what the central idea or the point of the passages that they just read. The rationale to this is to help students record their thoughts and findings while reading new pieces of literature. And also just to make sure that we are helping foster comprehension, but also that it helps students identify the key elements of this new text and focus those thoughts in finding the central idea and theme of what they are reading. The real key to this is that students understand they're not just taking random notes as they're reading through each paragraph, that they're writing down the key elements of what they're reading, that they're asking and reflecting on, well, what's important of those 3 paragraphs that I just read? What is the author trying to get across to me? My students are now creating bubble maps to contain their GIST statements as they read because of the text is now being online, and I will show you an example of that as we move through. Here are all the standards that this addresses, and again, we are trying to make sure that they can summarize the key supporting details and ideas, and also that they will eventually understand what the central idea of the passage is. But these are the standards that GIST statements generally focus on if you're doing it the more standard way. Who is this intended for? For me, this is intended for middle school or high school level ELA classes, but it can also be used in other classes as well, such as social studies or science, if they're reading through challenging texts. So to take you through the preparation stage, the teacher would select a topic and a text. This can be from a textbook or a chapter, or even if it's just an article, just work well with anything that you'd like to use. The teacher decides if students will work individually, in pairs, or in small groups. Generally, when I do this, I like to do this in stages, giving them the opportunity to work on it first individually, to challenge themselves, and to make sure that they're asking any questions if they're missing anything. Then to work with a partner, to throw their ideas off of a partner and make sure that they're correct by comparing their ideas to somebody else. And then small group and then whole group as we move through it. Step 2, the teacher introduces the topic and text to the students and previews the text with the students. So when I show you my example in a little bit, I would be doing the first example with them and then letting them go off on their own. The teacher assigns partners or groups if students are not working independently. Again, that's teacher discretion. And the teacher introduces and explains the GIST strategy, which again I have modified in my classroom to help my students that are struggling with reading off the computer and taking notes with digital tools. As we start to read, we get into stage 5, where students draw their central center bubble and label it central idea. Then they draw 2 lines at the top of the paper and write title and topic. Now this should be the first step that they do, because the first thing that they should be thinking is, okay, when I'm done reading this, I should be able to identify the central idea, which is why that's the middle bubble in this bubble map. Also, to make sure that they are in fact reading the title and originally thinking about what that title implies that the topic of the article is, we have them draw these 2 lines at the very top, because again, that should be the first things, these are the first 3 things that they're thinking about. Next, the student draws in their first bubble and they number it 1. That way I know where their bubble map starts, because some students like to draw their first bubble on the left-hand side of the page, some do it in the center, some do it on the right, and at least this way I can know in what order their bubbles are going. They continue drawing as they write in their first gist statement. They cite the paragraph that they found the information in. Now, the reason why that is important is because I also like to teach my students that if they have a super short paragraph that's only a sentence or 2 long, they might want to chunk that paragraph with either the paragraph before or the paragraph after, whichever one is more relevant with. So by labeling or citing the paragraph that their gist statement goes along with, it helps me understand where they're getting that information from. They then continue drawing bubbles in a clockwise order, chunking shorter paragraphs together so that they can identify the who and the what is happening as they progress through the text. Now, those are 2 key concepts that we like to make sure that we tell students to look for: who the paragraph is referring to or who is speaking, and also what it is that they are talking about or what is happening. Now, a lot of gist statements for the younger grades like to go through the 5 W's and the H. We really just focus on these 2 as we're writing our gist statements. Lastly, step 6, when they are finished writing their gist statements, they reread what they wrote and then create the central idea of the text in the middle bubble. This is so important because so many times students just write their gist statements and then they never go back and look at them. If they go back and reread what they wrote, they should be able to identify those key elements that they found already in the text and piece those key elements together to get the central idea. So this is an example of what it is we use. Some teachers like to give this to students right off the bat and eventually like wean them off of it so that they make it themselves. I put this up as a model for my students, but I generally just have them write it without making photocopies of it because I want them to get used to drawing this and writing everything in from the jump. So again, they would draw in their central idea bubble first, and then they would write the title and the topic at the top before they begin to read. I like having their number 1 right about here so that way they're going in a clockwise order. But sometimes they start in either this bubble or this bubble. But you do have to tell your students to make sure that it's clockwise and to make sure they know what that means, because I have had students that are writing this way or they're just writing all over the place. So to switch real fast, I want to show you an example of what my students did this year so far. We started with a text called Equal Rights for Women, which is a speech by Shirley Chisholm. And it's talking about equal rights for women in the workplace. Now, this was the start of our module, which the theme is taking a stand. So I told students as we were reading through this to identify what stand Shirley Chisholm is taking, what the key points are that she is expressing to this Mr. Speaker, and also to see if they can identify the counterclaim, which we've talked about prior, and how she presents both sides to an argument. So my students have had a little bit of background before reading this, but again, right now, all we're focusing in on is that these key elements that they have already learned, they can identify that and put it in a gist statement. So I've broken down the paragraphs and I've already numbered it for them. So we would read through this once as a clean read because it is a little bit lengthy, but we want to make sure that they're reading through it once on their own. I would read it out loud to them. And then we go back and I would walk them through chunking these first few paragraphs and showing them how I would write a gist statement. And by the time we get to the halfway point, which is about paragraphs 10 and 11, they would start writing it individually. After we do that, the next lesson is that they are able to identify the central idea and that they are able to answer these text-dependent questions based off the notes that they have. Based off the notes that they have taken while reading this passage. So again, it starts off with them identifying the title, the topic, and what type of text this is, because I want to make sure that they know that this is a speech. And then they answer these 5 questions, which are pretty standard and that are things that we've gone over while we were identifying just key details and the central idea. So it has started to work. We did do one more passage after this where they did it entirely independently. Called Ain't I a Woman? And from this point on, we are also going to implement this strategy when they take their learn checks by having the passages on their computer, providing them with a sheet of paper, and having them do this from here on out. So if they can master this strategy, they will have been doing it from October, November, all the way until May when they take their EOG, so they should be very well versed with this.